me today on Maple Leafs Man Advantage, and I'm Hawkeye. And now this video, I'm going to get into the 1969-70 season with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I'm going to talk about the East Division that they were in. This is the third year in a row now after the original six. They did the original expansion with six new teams. They've still got those 12 teams the next year. We may be looking at some more teams. But as of right now, they are still in the East Division, and that is the original six teams all together in their own division. And the Leafs have got themselves a new GM and coach. The GM is Jim Gregory, and the coach is John McClellan. And we're going to take a look now and see what the Leafs uh, do in this particular season. This was actually the final season until I believe it was 2005-06, where the home team wore the dark colored uniforms like this one here. The Leafs would be wearing blue at home. This was the final season that they did that, and then they changed it the following season. Personally, I have no idea why they did that. The best um, jerseys or sweaters, the look generally, and off the top of my head, is usually always the dark colored sweater. For some reason, they put that on the road and then went with the white jerseys at home. Luckily, they went back to the other way. I like that better, having the dark colors at home. This also was Dave Keon's very first season as captain of the Leafs. George Armstrong is still on the team, but he was talking about going to retire. I think he only played like 49 games this particular season, but they gave the C to Keon. Armstrong's still there, and Keon worked for the first time on Halloween night, December the 31st, or October the 31st. December 31st is New Year's Eve. October the 31st, 1969. You could compare it. I think it's very different. You could compare it to them taking the C off Tavares and giving it to Matthews. I think that's a very different situation. I wasn't alive when this happened, when the C went to Keon, but what the Leafs did here, it was strange. I don't quite understand why they did what they did. Tavares is still on the team. He's actually second on the team in goals. Um, he's playing very well this season. And you strip the C off of him and put it on Matthews, who I don't know, like it. I would have left the C on Tavares and just let him run out his contract and then find the new captain at that point. But anyways, we're going to go back to the 69-70 season here and talk more about that. So looking at the standings, finishing first this season and rebounding excellently after the previous season, they were in dead last, was the Chicago Blackhawks. They finished with 45 wins and 99 points. Stan Mikita led the club with 39 goals. It was Tony Esposito, though, who was new to Chicago, finding a new home there. He led the NHL with 38 wins, a very nice 932 save percentage, and 15, yes, I said 15 shutouts in this particular season. He came from the Montreal Canadiens. He was like their third goalie there. That's how deep Montreal was in that. But he also won the Calder as the top rookie and the Vezina as the top goalie in the same season. But don't think this was a cakewalk for Chicago. Just looking at the standings, they are tight. Must have been a good, exciting end to the season here in the East Division. In second place was the Boston Bruins. They had 40 wins and the same 99 points that the Hawks did, but Chicago had five more wins, so they are in first place. Phil Esposito led the Bruins and the league. He had 43 goals and 18 power play goals. Pretty good job there by Phil. Bobby Orr, though, he led the league with 87 assists and 120 points. Bobby was the only player to date to do this um, in as a defenseman, leading the league in points. Remarkable job there by Bobby. And he was the only guy or the only player this year to get 100 points. It was Bobby Orr. Um, Incredible. He also obviously won the Art Ross for getting the most points in the season. He also won the Norris as the top defenseman and the Hart as the MVP of the league. Excellent job there. And guess what? He was only 21 years old to start the season. Incredible. He turned 22 in March of 1970. In that for the Bruins, they had that nice 1-2 punch still. They had Jerry Cheevers. He had 24 wins and 4 shutouts, as well as Eddie Johnston. He had 16 wins and 3 shutouts. So they were doing excellent in Boston as well. In third place, it was the Detroit Red Wings. They were doing a real good job here in climbing the standings. They had 40 wins and 95 points. It was Gary Unger who led the way with 42 goals. Former Leaf, Gordie Howe, at age 41, he had 71 points. Gordie was still getting it done. Um, and in that, Detroit had two well working parts there. They had Roy Edwards with 24 wins and 2 shutouts, as well as Roger Crozier returning to form here with 16 wins and a very nice 920 save percentage. So Detroit was improving very well in third place here. So the last spot, there's only 4 making it in the playoffs in the East. We have 2 teams with the exact same record. First, we have the New York Rangers. Dave Bolin led the squad with 33 goals, as well as 100 penalty minutes. He led the club in both of those categories. Walt Tkachuk led the team with 77 points. In net, it was Eddie Giacomin, who played the majority of the time in the net for the Rangers. He played a lot of it. He led the NHL with his 70 games played. That's remarkable. He had 35 wins, 6 shutouts, and a nice 236 goals against average. Now, the other team with the exact same record was the Montreal Canadiens, who won the last 2 Stanley Cups. Jacques Lemaire led the Habs with 32 goals. Excuse me. Yvon Cornway had 63 points. And in net was the youngster Rogie Vachon. He was the number 1 guy in Montreal now. And he played most of the time there. Gump Worsley was still in Montreal, but he wasn't, he was kind of used sparingly now. And I think he was even 40 years old. He was getting up there. But Vachon had 31 wins and 4 shutouts for Montreal. So both teams had a 38, 22, and 16, 16 being ties record, and they both had 92 points. So how do we figure out who makes the playoffs? Well, when I looked it up back then, if you have the same amount of wins and everything like that, it would then would be based on goals for the amount of goals your team scored. So these teams knew going into the last weekend of play, this is going on. So they're really wanting to score goals. Goalies were pulled when no one would do that, but we're pulling the goalie, try and put pressure on the other team, try and score goals. Interesting. Montreal ended up losing 10-2 in their attempt to try and score goals with their goalie out. That failed. The New York Rangers ended up scoring 2 more goals than the Habs, so they were in, and Montreal was out. This was the only time I find from 1949 to 1994 that the Montreal Canadiens missed the playoffs. And guess what? They couldn't have. They had a great 605 winning percentage, and you cannot make the playoffs. That was one tight division going on there. That also puts the cup up for grabs, you might say, as Montreal had won the previous 2, and they're out now. So it's a battle now to see who's going to win the cup this year, as Montreal is not invited to the dance. Yeah, crazy. So then this puts our team, the Toronto Maple Leafs, in last place. They finished with 29 wins and 71 points. That record still would have put them second in the West. So, yeah, they weren't so great this year, but they still would have performed very well in that other division. But that's not the division they were in. So we're going to take a deeper look here at the Leafs, and it was Ron Ellis who led the team. He had 35 goals, real good job there. Dave Keon had 32, and they had two other 20 goal scorers in Mike Walton with 21 and Paul Henderson with 20. Keon ended up leading the team with 62 points. He had 9 power play goals and 2 shorties, led the squad in those statistics. Walton led the team. He had 6 game winners. Good job there. And in the penalty minutes department, it was Rick Lee who had 102 for the Leafs. So in net for the Leafs, Johnny Bauer still put a game in here. He still played 1 game for the Leafs, so he hasn't retired as of yet, officially, but they still had Bruce Gamble. He was the number 1 guy. He played 52 games. He had 19 wins, 5 shutouts, 915 save percentage, and a 306 goals against average. Newly acquired Marv Edwards, they picked him up in the intra-league draft. He would also play 25 games. He'd have 10 wins, 1 shutout, and a 910 save percentage, and a 326 goals against average. It looks like these boys were getting peppered with shots. Um, they needed to improve that. Um, improve defensively to not allow so many shots on your goalie. So also in that, as I said, was Johnny Bauer, but also future GM of the Leafs, Jerry McNamara. He played 2 games for the Leafs as well, and he would be GM, I believe, in the early '80s for the Leafs as well. So now looking at the ranking of the Leafs in comparison to the rest of the league, Ellis ended up in 7th place with his 35 goals, and Keon was way down in 22nd place for his 62 points. Ahead of him were other ex-Leafs, say as JP Parise, Frank Mahovlich, or Gary Unger. Um, Toronto was not in such a great spot here. They needed to cut down the shots against, as I said, and get some more goals. In the 12-team league, they were 8th in goals for, while they were 9th in goals against. So they're kind of like in the middle there. They need to get better in both departments to really make a push for it, and certainly first step making the playoffs there. So I'm just gonna I'm gonna run downstairs and grab my list for the team, but I'm gonna edit it out so you'll never even notice how long this takes. See, that was really quick, wasn't it? But I'm gonna show you now the Leafs team, and this will be my team. So I didn't. I knew going in the Leafs were not going to make the playoffs, but I'm not going to be. I'm not going to be like, hey, I'm going to trade this guy, this guy, this guy, and that guy, to try and go for it right now. Kind of just let things happen as they did, really, and build through the draft, and so we can do because they still got some great parts here in Toronto. So here we go. This was the Leafs of 1969-70. So I'm not sure if these lines are correct once again, but you got Dave Keon there on the top line. I got Bobby Pulford, he's still in Toronto, and Mike Walton up on the top line. Still got Ullman, Ron Ellis, and Paul Henderson on the left there. And then you got Britt Selby, Murray Oliver, and George Armstrong played a little bit. And then you got Terry Clancy, son of King Clancy, and Smith on right wing there. And on defense, you now have Jim McKenney. He's now getting time in Toronto. Punch him, Lack's gone, so McKenney's getting time. He got 11 goals this season. You still got Timmy Horton, great defenseman there. And then you got a bunch of young Ds. So you got Dory, Lee, Quinn. You also have Brian Glennie and Mike Pellick. This was their first season in the league. So you got a lot of defensemen there to choose from. And then also there is Spencer on left wing, was just picked up in the previous draft. And in that, you got Campbell and Edwards in that. Gonna leave them all in there. So the only change I'm going to make here is I am going to put Bobby Sheehan in as another center. That means Ron Ward, who I just picked up, I'm going to trade. I'm going to get rid of him. Um, and I'll just say, looking at the standings from the previous season, sure, I'll trade him to the Minnesota North Stars. Give me a fifth round pick. So you got it. Hopefully that's okay. For 1970, that draft. Give me a fifth rounder. I'll give you a Ron Ward. Let's go. Game on. So, anyways, that's the 1969-70 season. And there are going to be trades I'm going to be talking about in the next couple of videos here. So there will be some changes to this team through these trades. So, anyways, if you like this video, go ahead and hit like and definitely subscribe. I got more videos on here about the Leafs and hockey coming through time, looking at why the Leafs haven't won a Stanley Cup since 1967. And if you want to comment on anything, go ahead and do that. That would be great. I just love talking about hockey. I love hockey, so that's great. So, anyways, until next time, go Leafs, go.